Mountain Talk is brought to you by Navajo County, serving our neighbors, our communities, our home. It is Thursday, February 6th, Thursday being Navajo County Day here at Mountain Talk. And we're here live at the KVSL studios. That's 107.9 FM, 1450 AM, and on the web at kvslradio.com. And by the way, if you have a smartphone, you can now get us on the KVSL official apps, both on Android and the iPhone. So make sure you download those. Today, I've got a full house and people on the phone. So let's bring everybody online here. With me, first of all, is Supervisor David Tenney, Navajo County Board of Supervisors, District number 4.
4, correct,
How
Birdman.
are you, sir?
I'm good. How you doing?
And we're calling me Birdman today. I'm Rob Hephner, of course, because there's another Rob online too, and that's Mr. Rob Davis. He's on telephone, President and CEO of Forest Energy. Can you hear us there, Rob?
I can hear you.
Oh.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have Brad Worsley. He's the President and CEO of Novo Power. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Rob?
Okay, so we're here today to talk about the forest, obviously, and the energy that comes from the forest and the industry around the forest. Typically when we start the show, we give everybody introductions, we talk a little bit, but since it's such a full palette of discussion today, we're going to forego that. Mr. Tenney, we'd talked to you before we know you pump gas. So.
Absolutely. That's my first job. I was actually looking forward to hearing Brad and Rob's first job. You got to at least ask them that, right?
Okay, we'll get to them. But you also had another job, didn't you? A family business that had to do with logging?
Absolutely. My family's been in the timber industry, had been until about 20 years ago in the timber industry for about 4 generations. As a matter of fact, my great-great-grandfather brought the first sawmill into Arizona from Utah. Was sent down by the Mormon prophet Brigham Young to bring that steam-powered sawmill down there many, many years ago. Came down over Lee's Ferry and whatnot and set it up near the Flagstaff area. And anyway, so yeah, that's been in my family for years and years. We had many sawmills and lumber stores and different things, and certainly our family has always depended upon the forest.
Yeah, so you just tied the whole White Mountains into one sentence. I like that. So Brigham Young and everything all the way around.
Yes,
that's,
absolutely.
Rather impressive. Rob, on the phone there, how did you get into the foresting industry?
Well, I grew up just across the state line over on the Gila, and so the mountains up here have been a part of my life since I was little, fishing and hunting and all. And so, and then after a stint in industrial construction, I decided that renewable energy was the up-and-coming thing, and there was this wood that needed to be utilized, and so decided to build a plant.
Okay, so when David requested, what was your first job?
Mowing lawns, of course.
Mowing lawns. Nice. Yeah. Customer service there. Okay, cool.
See, I never got paid for that. That's why it was not my first job.
Oh.
I had to go out and find people that let me mow their lawns to get paid, So.
Yeah, I did that too. Brad, how about yourself? And Brad's, of course, from Novo Power. Rob, once again, is from the Forest Energy, and that's right here in Show Low. So, Brad.
So I'll address how we got in the industry first and then my first job.
Okay, good. That'll work.
So we have a home in the White Mountains outside of Heber, about 8 miles towards Black Canyon Lake, called Legacy Lodge. My parents invested several $1 million into that home, and it was, in their opinion, one of the most pristine, beautiful forests in the western United States. They looked at homes in Wyoming and Utah, Colorado, other places, and that's where they decided to build this vacation home. And when the Rodeo-Chedeski fire went through and destroyed that forest that surrounded that home, it was devastating and then frustrating. And so from that, my dad is a serial entrepreneur, and he found a way to utilize that wood, and from that was born the biomass plant that resides between Heber and Snowflake.
Okay, cool. And then your first job?
I raised cows, I mowed lawns, but my first formal job where I received a paycheck was at Water and Ice. I made ice.
Nice. I actually ran an ice plant for my father. I was, So ice is, I always say, you don't make ice. It's just a time business. Basically, it's people don't have enough, because anybody can make ice. It's just time. So back to the wood. So obviously, because of where we are, this was bound to be a foresting sort of location. And the stands of trees have diminished over the last 20 years. Let's back up 20 years. And Mr. Tenney, if you could address this, from Navajo County, from your perspective, actually from the foresting and everything and living up here, what happened 20 years ago or previous to that? I mean, everything seemed to be going along fine, and then something happened, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the forest, the reason the communities are here is because of the forest. The people settled here because there was this resource. There was the water, there was the timber, and they could use that to make money, to build homes and those kind of things. That's why the communities of the White Mountains are here. But then, starting, decades long, there were issues with the Forest Service, how they were managing the forest. The environmental community started to become upset with how the Forest Service was handling things with the timber industries, and they felt like that there was too much going on there, that there was too much logging happening. And then back in the 80s and the 90s kind of started the timber wars, where the environmental groups started suing the Forest Service and the companies over the timber sales that were being let out, and things like spotted owls and goshawks and other endangered species started to become the tool that they used to shut those down.
Right.
And that war went on for quite some time until it basically effectively shut down almost 100% of the timber industry that was going on here in northeastern Arizona. And that's what led to the paper mill going from using pulp to going to recycle. That's what drove companies like ours out of business and forced to sell off one mill at a time, and caused for the forests that were pretty healthy, even though the environmental groups might not have agreed with how they were cut. At least it wasn't the overgrown thickets that we have now, where there are 2,000 trees on average per acre rather than 80 trees per acre. I mean, that's and so it became grossly overgrown because of the mismanagement that was forced upon the Forest Service and industry, and actually drove industry out. There wasn't effectively any industry, and then the forest just become more and more unhealthy.
Yeah, so a little outside perspective from my point of view. I lived down in the valley, and then previous to that, the first time I really started hearing about forests, forestation, spotted owls, things like that, was down when I lived in Georgia, and about that time was the whole paper versus plastic in stores, and there was like, oh, they're using a paper, they're destroying trees, and everything that I got propaganda wise was really based around we're destroying our forests, we're tearing them apart. So my only perspective of forest was cutting down trees can't be good.
Correct.
So then I moved down into Phoenix, and then the forest fires happened, and everybody's up in arms about forest fires. And we once again get going. Well, of course, have always been around, so of course they catch on fire and they're going to burn down. And it was like, it's like circle of life kind of thing. But then you got to put into the fact that we live in the forests. Right. And then I move up here, and all of a sudden you want to talk about an eye-opening moment. And it was before the wall of fire even occurred. It was like, oh, wow. Okay, you walk around these forests, and I could go from one area, and I'll just call it out. I go through the Apache lands, and I see a forest, and it's nice and cleaned out and nice, and wow, okay. And then you drove literally across the line. It was like, why is this all thickened up? And my wife at the time worked at the fire service, and she said, well, that's because we're not allowed to clean them up. And I'm like, I don't get that. No, we're not allowed to clean them up. Well, why wouldn't you be allowed to clean them up? And so that's what happened literally right before Rodeo-Chedeski.
That's what happened for a few decades right before, and then it gets exponentially worse.
Right.
And that's what causes the problem. That's what causes the mega fires, the landscape scale fires, instead of a fire that, when I was a kid, a 5 or a 10,000 acre fire was a big fire.
Right.
That was a big deal.
Right.
And now we've had, in the last 12 years, 2 fires of about 500,000 acres each. And it's because the forests are so thickly overgrown that when a fire starts, the fire quickly gets up into the crown of the trees and burns from tree to tree in those needles, and it just keeps advancing and keeps advancing until it's this huge fire. When you have a properly maintained and managed forest, that fire will drop down to the ground and creep along the ground, burn up the overgrown, the fuels on the ground, which you want to do, but it won't damage the trees. And that's what you saw in the Wallow fire, particularly when the fire hit Greer, Alpine, Nutrioso, those areas had been thinned through the White Mountain Stewardship Contract, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Because those areas had been thinned out, the fire got out of the crowns of the trees, dropped down to the ground, crept along. It was able to be managed. It burned out, and they were able to save those communities. And that's the kind of fire is a natural thing in the forest, but you can't live in it and expect you're going to put fires out and at the same time not thin the forest and manage it. Those don't go together.
Right. So ultimately, the goal here is to have a healthy forest.
Absolutely.
That provides commerce for the people to live in it.
Absolutely.
Provides a place for people to come up to be able to camp, be safe, and all those kind of things.
All of the above, and that's where people like Brad and Rob, who are here today,
Yes.
have stepped up with their put their money where their mouth is and saying, we not only want healthy forests, but we're willing to do something, to employ people and put industry to work to do something about it. And they're trying to use the products coming out of the forest as they're thinned out to make power or to make pellets, which then warms your home or whatever. And so my hat's off to gentlemen like these who are actually stepping up to the plate and trying to do what the industry has not been allowed to do for a few decades.
Okay, so let me set the stage. We're going to come back. We're going to go to the break, and we're going to talk about the news. We've got the forest update, actually what's going on with the Apache-Sitgreaves forest, the Chronicle of the Old West. And we're going to come back, and we're going to talk to Rob Davis, who's the President and CEO of Forest Energy. We're going to talk to Brad Worsley, the President and CEO of Novo Power. Of course, Supervisor Tenney will be here, and myself, Rob Hephner. We're going to talk about where we've come since those 20 years, since those two fires, and what's going on now. And then when we come after that, we'll go to a break. We'll come after that. We're going to talk a little bit how the environmentalists fit into all of this and how we can all live together in the forest peacefully, happily, and prosperous.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Good. So we'll be back right here on Mountain Talk right after this break. And welcome back to Mountain Talk. I'm Rob Hephner, your host, right here live from KVSL Studios in our American Log Homes cabin. That's right, you can stop by all the way Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and on Saturday from 9 to 1 to check it out. We sell over 20 different models, and they can be your home as soon as you'd like. In studio, once again, I have Supervisor David Tenney from Navajo County Board of Supervisors, District 4. I have Brad Worsley, who's the President and CEO of Novo Power. And then on the telephone, still, I have Rob Davis, President and CEO of Forest Energy. Now, you two gentlemen, Rob Davis and Brad Worsley, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the forest management industry itself. So, Rob, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. I can't tell when I nod at him. He doesn't nod back. So tell me a little bit about your business, what kind of business it is, and what you actually do for us.
Well, it's a renewable energy business. It takes wood, and we produce densified wood pellets, which is primarily used for heating homes in the U.S. We heat probably around 30,000 homes in the Southwest with the pellets that we produce. So we take the material it's not large enough that somebody wants it for a sawmill, and it's not the smaller material that Brad might use in the power plant. We take the smaller logs and we turn those into pellets.
Okay. Now, Brad, your business, what does it do exactly?
So we take biomass material, any type of biomass. We take valley green waste. We take ground pallets. We take pine needles and bark and limbs and tops from forestry operations. We take the pinon juniper that surrounds us in this community as you get out of the pine forest. Mm-hmm. Anything that you can take down to a sub 4-inch size, we put it into our boiler and we make power. So that boiler creates heat, creates steam, turns a turbine, and we provide 25 to 26 megawatts an hour, which is enough to power the homes of the White Mountains.
That's very good. Mr. Tenney.
Yeah, it turns on the lights right here. I mean, seriously, that's part of what you love about the rejuvenation of the industry. It's a different industry from what we had, 20, 30, 50 years ago.
Right.
But it certainly is forest industry. And one of them's aimed at using the product to heat our homes, and the other one to turn the lights on. So
previously, what was being done with the juniper, Brad?
Well, let me address juniper and the rest of it. We are distinctly different than anything done previously because we take the material that everyone else used to throw away. We don't need big wood, sub 5-inch diameter wood, bark, limbs, pine needles, the stuff that used to be piled and burned and created the white smoke on controlled burning days, hard for the environment, wasted material. That's the material we take. We don't take the good wood that can be used in higher ways. We take the material that is not valued and we create power from it.
Okay, so if I get this right, Rob and Brad both sort of back me up here if I have it correct. The really good wood would be going to using for creating furniture or whatever and things like that.
Yeah, building lumber for homes and
then
furniture.
Rob, you use the wood that's maybe not really the standard that they would use for that, correct?
Correct.
And then anything else is basically what Brad's using, right? Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, good. So, Rob, tell me, how many people do you actually bring in? What do you do to the economy here locally with the White Mountains? How many people do you employ? What kind of money do you put into the business? That kind of a deal.
We've got 33 people on payroll there. And we bring in somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 to 26 truckloads a day of material from thinning projects or from the sawmills if we use their byproducts, something of that nature. We put out somewhere in the $10 to $12 million a year as far as money going into the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And late last year, I have to bring this up because somebody had asked us to ask. You had at your location here in Shoalo a little bit of an issue with some of the wood caught on fire, and something happened there. And they wanted to know what's been done to make sure those kind of things don't happen in the future.
Well, yeah, the log deck caught on fire. Nothing with the plant itself. It was the log deck.
Yeah.
And it was actually a piece of equipment that caught on fire that had been spread to it. And what we've done is we have 2 water trucks now, so when something like that occurs, we're there very rapidly to do something about it. As far as trying to deal with the issues, so if anything happens, we'll be on the fire within a minute. And
Well, it's certainly your business, so I'm sure you don't want it to go up in flames, so to speak.
no, and it took quite a few minutes for it to get into the log deck and do something, and then we didn't have the water trucks, and so we won't be in that situation again.
Awesome. Okay. So both of your businesses, you and Brad, are new to the area, and they come from a different era. Tell me how did the pellet industry come into be, and why?
Well, the pellet industry really came about in the early 80s as far as wood stoves to heat, pellet stoves to heat people's homes. And it really was a matter of it's a win-win-win. The sawmills in many places, especially the Southwest, really didn't have any place to go with a lot of their byproduct. We were adamantly looking at trying to get away from fossil fuels and go to more renewable fuels at the time. And pellet stoves on no-burn days in Maricopa County or Albuquerque or Denver are still acceptable because they're such clean-burning heating device.
Absolutely. And Brad, then your business is almost, how new is it, basically?
This plant was constructed in 2008. Biomass facilities have been around for several decades, but really the first of any scale in Arizona, and we maintain that status. We're pretty much the only one that does it, anything above 5 megawatts.
Okay, so Novo Power is like really brand new, and what is the future of it? What's the trending future for these kind of biomass plants?
Yeah, well, let me back up and answer a question you asked earlier.
Okay.
We have 38 employees. We provide over $12 million right into the White Mountains alone every year. And the reality is there is 3 or 4 times the amount of material out there that you could double or triple the size of this biomass plant if it were made accessible.
If it were made accessible. And that's when I want to bring Mr. Tenney in. Why can't they get material?
Well, fair question.
Okay.
They can't get material. The question is, can the Forest Service help them get material at the rate and the pace that they need it to be able to grow? And that's what we're working on now. Rob and Brad and Hunter Moore, who's here with us, myself, and several other men here in the area. We've been working in a group that's trying to promote what's going on here and do everything we can to see to it that Congress funds the Forest Service in such a way as to allow them to have the manpower on the ground to get this acreage ready so that it can be treated, it can be thinned, it can be restored, and create even more jobs. So that's it really becomes a funding issue. The Forest Service spends way too much money in putting out fires and not near enough money in restoring the forest on the front end so that they don't have fires on the back end. And the silly thing about that, Birdman, is that it costs much less per acre to treat it on the front end than it does per acre to put out a fire.
Well, sure. And you don't put lives in danger to put it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So this was something that dumbfounded me because I didn't know this, but I want to explain the procedure. The procedure is that the United States Forest Service has to actually go out and physically thin these forests, and that's why they need the money to do that. Because I was first asking, why do they need funding?
Well, they don't do the thinning. They contract with loggers and people that do the thinning, but it takes them. They need the money because of the people that have to go out and do the NEPA clearance.
Right.
Okay, the National Environmental Protection Act, they have to get all of this acreage cleared through NEPA. They have to do archaeological studies. They have to study for endangered species. They have to study for wildlands, for riparian areas, all of these things, so that it passes all the environmental laws that we've basically handcuffed ourselves with over the last 3 decades. And once that land becomes NEPA ready, they call it shelf stock, and then they're ready to go out to bid, and someone like Brad and the loggers he works with can bid on it, or Rob and the loggers he worked with can bid on it, and they can say, we'll go in and thin it for this kind of money, and we get the wood off of it.
And Rob,
so that's what the Forest Service needs the money for.
Just to remind everybody, Rob is with Forest Energy, and Brad is with the Novo Power. Now, is that where you have White Mountain Stewardship coming to play, or is that something different? Or
well, it is something different. The White Mountain Stewardship, and Rob's been one of the partners in that for the last 10 years. Dwayne Walker is the principal in White Mountain Stewardship. He got that contract 10 years ago, and that was to thin the forests here in the White Mountains through a stewardship contract where the Forest Service was finally saying, all right, we've got to put some money up, and we're going to actually subsidize it for a few years to help rebuild the infrastructure and the industry here in the White Mountains. So there was actually a program, the White Mountain Stewardship has actually for the last 10 years been doing that. And so that has absolutely helped Rob Davis and Dwayne Walker and Novo Power and Vaughan Brothers Mill over in Springerville and the Reedheads in New Trioso and all the different timber companies around here that had just about dwindled to nothing. Now we have over 300 plus direct jobs in the area, Rob. About 150 to 200 million dollars has been put into infrastructure in the last 10 years for forest industry, and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Just you hear 24, I mean hundreds of millions of dollars. You hear 24 million a year just in payroll with these two companies alone. So we've got this infrastructure rebuilt. Now we've got to keep it going and take it to the next level.
So Brad Worsley, we just heard him say from Novo Power that he could increase if he had available resources. Rob Davis from Forest Energy, could you increase your operations if you had more available to you?
We could increase if we had additional material. The biggest thing now is, are we going to have enough material just to continue the way we have? And that's the main concern right now. And we aren't, the Forest Service locally has been an extremely good partner. The environmental groups in the recent years have been a good partner in trying to make sure that everything is done correctly. But they've got to have the money to manage the forests. The Forest Service does. So and they've got to get it prepared so that we have something to go out and restore.
And that goes all the way back to Washington, D.C. And David, you got something to tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you bring it up. About an hour before I came here to be on this program, I got a phone call from Senator Jeff Flake, our U.S. Senator, who was in a hearing today with Chief Tidwell, Tom Tidwell, the Chief of the Forest Service. He knows that this area is high priority, and he talked to him about it. And I'm encouraged. I appreciate the help we're getting from our congressional delegation on this, and I appreciate Senator Flake trying to help us with this. But I was a little bit discouraged by the fact that Chief Tidwell kind of indicated to him, he was talking to him specifically about bridging the gap between the wood that's been coming off the White Mountain Stewardship and the wood that's going to come off in the forest restoration contract. And he's saying, we've got to make sure we keep these businesses going. And he said Chief Tidwell's response was along the lines of, I think it's going to be up and running pretty quick and we're going to be okay. I don't think he sees yet the urgency and the need that they have to focus their resources and their energy and their attention on making sure we do bridge the gap between what's going on now and what's finally going to happen when we get the second phase of the Fry contract going here.
Yeah. So Rob Davis from Forest Energy, what does the White Mountain Stewardship mean to you?
Well, the White Mountain Stewardship Contract was a means of industry being assured a supply of wood for 10 years. And a business can't operate unless they know that they're going to have wood a year or 2 or 3 down the road, and that's why new industry came in here. We have 4 sawmills that are operating now that weren't 10 years ago. We have the power plant that wasn't operating 10 years ago. We have a post and pulp business that is operating now that wasn't. We've developed the way to use this wood and the way to pay for this restoration on the ground, partially through private investment and partially through public investment in the White Mountain Stewardship Contract. We can't let that investment be for nothing.
Okay. And then Brad Worsley, what's it mean to you, the White Mountain Stewardship Program?
Well, the White Mountain Stewardship Program, to me, was an indication by the federal government that they were going to get out of the way and allow us to create industry through the wood that is owned by, as a collective group by the U.S. government, by the state of Arizona, and they were making a commitment 10 years ago that if they invested, we would invest, and they need to continue that bargain and continue to make that wood available without subsidy. We can make it work.
Okay, so before we go to the break, let me just go over, since its inception, the White Mountain Stewardship has completed a 4-county community wildlife protection plan. They've accelerated the thinning and burning near local communities. They've encouraged new wood fiber business in the local economy. They've reduced the thinning cost by 30 to 50% an acre, and they were the primary reason the fire crews were able to save the communities of Alpine, Nutrioso, Eager, and Springerville during the Wallow fires. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And it goes much beyond that. We can talk about some more of that after the break.
We're going to go to the break, and this is the people you need to meet, which is Ed Lartenson, and we'll be back right after this. This is Mountain Talk on KVSL, and I'm your host, Rob Hephner. And we're back to Mountain Talk. This is Rob Hephner, your host here at KVSL. We just have a few minutes left, and I want to wrap this up. Once again, in studio, had David Tenney with the Navajo County Board of Supervisors District 4, Rob Davis on phone with, he's the president and CEO of Forest Energy, and Brad Worsley, the president and CEO of Novo Power. Gentlemen, I just want to put these facts out here a little bit. There's about 2.4, and we talked about this, about 2.4 million acres in the forest area. And I think you've all agreed that that's about right. Between the environmentalists and everybody else, about 1 million of that has been agreed upon that could be forest mechanically without any issues. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And when you say agreed upon, that's everybody that's at all the stakeholders, including the environmental groups. They agree that it's okay to thin this mechanically.
So if we were to take 50,000 acres a year and go at them and use them, we would be able to, every 20 years, restart a cycle with that amount of forest. Okay, that's simple math, and everybody's agreed upon that.
Correct.
So 50,000 would be great. Well, let's look at they sort of agreed about 20,000 locally. Now, if there was 20,000 acres here between Novo Power, between Forest Energy, that would be good.
Brothers, Reedhead Brothers,
that'd be good.
all of the above. 20,000 acres a year they can handle.
Okay, as of right now, they're getting 5,000 acres a year. Okay, so that's about
25% of what we need.
Yeah, no, well, and 50,000 is what we should be doing.
10% of what we need to do to clean the whole forest. Absolutely right.
Okay, specifically, I want to call out Novo Power. Novo Power deals with opinion and all the other crap. And when I say crap, I mean it's the stuff nobody wants, right?
That's right.
Okay, Brad. Hey, Brad, Yarnell, that was all made out of what?
Pinon juniper.
Pinon juniper. Could you have had that be in a safe condition so we wouldn't have had a forest fire like we had there?
Absolutely. If we had access to that, we could thin 50,000 acres of that a year and not have that be a forest hazard.
So it's not only the health of our forest, it's the health of our firefighters. It's 19 lives wouldn't be put at risk. This is a serious thing. It seems detached because, like I said, when I wasn't here, I didn't understand this. This is a message we all need to deliver to everyone, and everybody's on board, right, David?
They are, and everybody means local government. It means entrepreneurs and businessmen like Brad and Rob and others that are in the industry. It means the environmental community. It means Congress, the governor's office, all of us. And we've got to keep doing it this way. Never before have we had the cooperation we have now. Now's the time to move it forward.
Rob Davis from Forest Energy, what would you like to say, just real quick, like 20 seconds?
Well,
good.
Real quick, 20 seconds is I want to be optimistic. I want to think that the new farm bill that just passed provides some things that we might be able to use, but it still boils down to Congress needs to want to manage their public lands. They've got to want the public lands to have the treatment that they need for our watersheds, for our air, for everything.
Brad Worsley, what do you have to say?
We improve forest health. We bring energy to the mountain. We improve watershed. And so this makes sense, and we need to make sure that we're putting pressure to get those lands made available.
Okay, look to hear about this more. We need to talk about this more. We're going to get at least David Tenney in here again, and maybe some of these other gentlemen in here again to talk about this issue. This is very important, and this is something that we're all going to need to take to our state and to our federal legislatures.
Amen.
Call Mr. Flake's office tell him we need this consistently. The more message we get in there, the better. I thank you for listening to Mountain Talk. Just a few seconds left here. Thank you again, Supervisor Tenney, for coming in today. And,
thank you. You guys do a great job and for letting us get our word out to people. We appreciate the partnership we have with KVSL.
Okay, folks, so 10 seconds left. You're going into John Tesh next. I'm Rob Hephner, your host here on Mountain Talk. Remember, every Thursday is Navajo County. KVSL Sholo, K300CL Sholo.